I think I already turned it on. Am I on? Yeah? Okay, I'm already on. Hi, guys. How you doing? Good to see everybody again. It's been a little bit of time, but I'm looking around here. Mostly the same faces. A couple of newer faces, but it's great to be here. It's great to see everyone.
Great to see you.
Oh, thank you, B. I always enjoy the interaction here. That's nice, too. I'm talking, someone will talk back. I like that. But, what's up? I'm not on?
Yeah, green light.
There we go, green light. We're good now. All right, I'm on now. My voice is pretty loud. But for those of you, I do see some faces here that I don't recognize. I'll introduce myself and my family very briefly. As Pastor said, my name is Chris Jackey. I've been a member here, boy, for over 20 years. Been coming here since the late 1990s when the church was across the street in a very small building. So there's only a couple people here that have been here longer than me, maybe 4 or 5 families. I'm here with my wife, Diane, who's over there in the back corner. Wave. Say hi, honey. And my youngest daughter, Faith. I have 3 children who are in college, and I have a daughter who's in law school. So we have 5 children, and we've lived here in the New York, New Jersey area for our whole lives. And then just a couple, not even, is it a month ago? A month ago, we moved down to Richmond, Virginia. So we're the Southerners now, and so I'll try to belt out a y'all or two for you guys as we go along. I haven't picked that up yet, but so we're down there. My job, as Pastor mentioned, moved me down there. So that's kind of a brief history of who I am. For those of you who I've not had the opportunity to meet, hopefully I'll get a chance to meet you. But I'm happy to be here, and the Lord has been working in my heart for quite a while about this particular ministry, which I'll share some little bits and pieces about while I preach this morning, but I'll cover it in more detail if you have some time this afternoon. But we'll do that. And so one thing I'm hoping that I don't get when I come here, it sounds like you were kind enough to offer the last speaker, well, he's not quite the last speaker, COVID. I've already had it, so I really don't want it again. And so if I could leave here without getting it again, I would appreciate that very much. That would be very kind of you all. Y'all, that would be very, very nice. But turn in your Bibles, if you would, to Exodus chapter 6. I wasn't here, but I think Pastor read it. Did he read it? Think he read it? Yeah, he covered it. Good, good, good. And some things haven't changed. We came here this morning. We drove up last night, stayed in Staten Island. And I said to my wife and my daughter, we're going to get here nice and early this morning, because I was always late. I'm notoriously late. I'd get here at 9:58, 9:59, walk in late. That was just my kind of MO in life, unfortunately. Just going to get here early. Today will be no problem. And when we get here early, I'm going to find a parking spot like that right away. Because I used to drive around for like 15, 20 minutes. We got here at 9:20, still no parking spots. I did have to stop and get bagels first, because the bagels in Richmond are pretty bad, so we stopped. But I still got here at 9:20 and couldn't find a parking spot. So I'm glad to see that some things haven't changed. So we're going to look at the scriptures from, I will preach eventually, I promise you. But we're going to look at the scripture that Pastor spoke on this morning in Exodus chapter 6. But before we do, I want to share a quick, I guess a story or an illustration with you. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was headed into New York City for a day of meetings in the city. I had lived in New Jersey. My offices were in New Jersey. And I went to the local train station where I would pick up the train to get into the city. And I parked my car, and I got out of my car, and I'm walking away, maybe here from the door, away from my car. And all of a sudden, I got stopped in my tracks. And a voice came into my head and go back to the car and get a tract, gospel tract. So I stopped. I'm like, what was that? I'm like, okay, yeah, no problem. I go back. I walk back to my car. I got tracts. I normally had them in my bag, but for some reason I didn't have any more left. And so I got the tract. Then went on with my day. I had meetings, and I'm in a meeting in the afternoon. And I meet with these 2 gentlemen who I knew, who I had traveled with extensively, so we were friendly. And I had the meeting with these 2 individuals. And towards the end of the meeting, I'm getting up to leave, and one of the guys who, again, we were friendly with, he starts walking me towards the door, and God says, give it to him. I said, really? Right now? It's just kind of a weird spot in a business meeting. He said, give it to him now. I said, okay. So I said to him, I said, hey, I'd like to share this with you. It's something that's been very important to me. It's very meaningful to me. And honestly, the Lord asked me to give this to you. And so would you mind if I left this with you and you read it? And he said, all right. So I left, and I walked out to the elevator. I'm waiting at the elevator. And all of a sudden, he comes tooling out the door of his office, almost running at me. I'm thinking to myself, oh, boy. here we go, I'm in trouble. He's going to let me have it. He's a Jewish guy, so, you know, a little bit more stress and tension. He's actually from Israel. I'm thinking, okay, he's going to really, he's going to let me have it. And in reality, he says to me, wow, thank you so much for giving this thing to me. I really needed this. I really needed this. And he said, would you mind if we speak more on the subject? Would you mind if we reached out to you and I came in and spoke to you more? I said, yeah, of course I would. I'll cut to the chase. A long story short, he and I had a real connection. He's a great guy. I've become good friends with him, and we had a real connection. And he was a guy who was really searching spiritually. Again, he was native of Israel, not practicing. He was open to reading the Bible. He was open to reading Christian literature. He loved to talk about God and about spiritual things. And after a little while, after a couple, I'm thinking, here we go. This guy's close. He's ready. He's going to get saved. This is pretty cool. You know, it's neat how the Lord is working here. And we talked frequently. He was always engaged. He was always friendly. He was always open. He was a great, like I said, he's just a great guy to talk to. I love meeting with him. Well, 4 years later, we're still in exactly the same place. He can't get past certain things. We have the same conversations. He expresses his frustration. He expresses his concern. He says, oh, I wish I could believe like you believe. I wish I could have that assurances like you have. I wish I could have those levels of peace and comfort like you have. He just can't. He can't. And it's interesting, as I got to know this gentleman, as I had an opportunity to minister and really become friendly with him, I found out some interesting facts. He had served in the military in his country, and I think he had experienced some pretty hard things while he was there. I think he had seen some things and maybe been involved with some things that are hard for human beings to experience and be involved in. I think that affected him deeply internally. And he'd had some family issues, some challenges in his family. And I could tell there was a great deal of pain that came from those family issues that he had, those things that he was suffering with. And he, there were some other things that he just wouldn't share with me. But every time you would kind of bring up the subject, you could just see pain and anguish. Again, this guy's a normal, successful business person, nice guy, but there was something deep inside of him that was wounded, that was hard. And it was hard for him to accept certain principles. He couldn't accept, like, forgiveness. He didn't understand that. It was hard for him to get. And cleansing. Couldn't understand that. And he didn't understand issues around pain and suffering. Why are these things happening? And there was just this deep-seated emotional scars that kept him from really committing. Now, God pretty clearly directed me to this man to speak to him. And I believe God was leading me as I spoke to him. And he was interested. He was very, very interested. Why was it so hard? Why was it so hard for him? And it's hard for everyone. The gospel's hard, and a lot of people you talk to, they don't listen. But why was it so hard for this man? I'm going to suggest, and I'll share from the scriptures, that there was maybe something about his history, about those wounds that he had gotten, about that, I don't know, I want to call it emotional baggage, because it's not baggage, but that those deep-seated things about his experience in his life that just made it hard for him to understand. And I think if we get into the scriptures as we look, we're going to see that you're going to run into people, going to run across people who are wounded, who are hurt, who are hurting. And you might have to take a little bit different tact, or you might have to have a little different level of expectations when you're ministering to those specific kinds of people. And I'll share that with you as we move along here a little further. But just think about it in our own lives. How many people do you come in contact with who share that same kind of experience? Like I said, they're scarred. They're wounded. They're hurting. They've been affected in some way. Maybe it's a spiritual thing. Maybe it's an emotional thing. Maybe it's a relational thing. Maybe it's a physical thing that's affecting them in other ways. How do we minister to those people? How do we make an impact on them? Should we deal with them differently? These are a couple of things that I kind of want to share with you today. And before I start, I guess this is Missions Emphasis Month, so before I start, I'll just ask you to think, maybe, you know, me being here is not, it's not an accident, but maybe God is directing you in some way, shape, or form to minister to help, to witness to someone who is hurting. A person is hurting. He's been working on you, saying, you know what, you should go talk to that particular person. They're in real need. And you might say, well, I'm scared. That person's got all kinds of problems or baggage or whatever. I'm afraid of that. Or maybe God has asked you to reach out to a compromised segment of people. I remember many years ago as a church, and I believe Jean and Mary spearheaded it, we had an outreach, a wonderful outreach to the Bay Family Center. It was the women's shelter around the corner. And we had a ministry to that compromised segment. Talk about wounded people. Well, I could share some stories. I don't know how much time. I probably don't have enough time to share more stories. But Pedro and I used to have to sit next door in the hallway to help make sure, because the children that used to come would cause so much trouble in the classes. They were so wild and crazy, we'd have to stand there and almost act as like bodyguards because they were hurting. The families were hurting. But that was a wonderful ministry to this compromised segment of people. Maybe he wants you to work with a specific ministry, or maybe, you know what, maybe he's calling you to some kind of vocational work with people who are hurting, who are wounded. There's so many of them out there. So I thought I would kind of throw that little thought out there. That's what he's called me to do. So I want to look at the passage. I think what I'm going to share with you, the points, you're not going to be like, whoa, that's unbelievable what he just shared. I think it's kind of basic, but I was going to preach on something else, and the Lord wouldn't let me get away from this. He just kept bringing me back to it and bringing me back to it and bringing me back to it. So hopefully he has something here for us, despite the fact that it's probably not going to be super unique what I'm going to say to you. And you might say, oh, that's pretty much common sense. But okay. So, Pastor read the text. Excuse me. Just a little bit of background. So, if you move back, I'm sorry. Water went down the wrong tube, sorry. The text here, the background here is, from the story that Pastor read, was, you're talking now, for those of you who are familiar or maybe not quite so familiar with the story, where before the 10 plagues, when Moses went in, obviously everyone knows the 10 plagues, and God told Moses, the burning bush, I want you to go to Pharaoh. I want you to tell him to let my people go. They've been here in Egypt for over 400 years. And so Moses goes to Pharaoh, and he tells him, and Pharaoh listens, and here's the story, Moses' plea, and he says, nah, I'm not going to let the people go. In fact, I'm going to make things even harder on them. I'm going to make it worse for them. You know the story, same bricks, no straw. And so Moses kind of leaves with Aaron with his tail between his legs, and he walks back out and he runs into the people. And they're like, what'd you do to us? You put us in this spot now. We got to do more work. We're already under this bondage, and now we got to do more work. And so Moses goes back to God. He says, you told me to go. What's going on here? Why are we having these kind of problems? And then the passage that Pastor read, God delivers a pretty rousing sermon, speech to Moses. And Moses then goes back and is going to tell the people. And then it says in verse 9, it's an interesting verse. It says this. It says, so God gave the message to Moses, and it said Moses spake so. So he shared that message, exactly what God told him, he shared it with the people, right? He said it unto the children of Israel. This is the verse I'm going to kind of focus on today. But they hearkened not unto Moses. So they didn't listen to him. Shared, they didn't listen. They didn't heed him. They didn't listen to what he had to say. Why didn't they listen to him? Interesting words here. For anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. For anguish of spirit and for cruel bondage. Now, like I said, I'm going to focus on those words right there, but the idea of anguish of spirit, it kind of means to be taken up with your troubles. It means to be cast down because of severe disappointments that you've had in your life. It means to have a deep-seated discontentment based on your present circumstances. So these people were just basically beaten down. They had so much inside of them because of the torment and the bondage they had gone through over the course of their lives. They couldn't even hear that message that God delivered to Moses. And then beyond that, it says, what else? Not only they have this anguish of spirit, but they've been involved in cruel bondage. They've been under bondage for so long. So these people had serious history. This rousing message didn't impact them. It didn't affect them. Well, why not? And if that's the case, how do we deal with people who might have that same kind of background, that same kind of history, those same kind of circumstances? Or maybe I'm talking to somebody here today and you're like, that's me. I'm dealing with that. You know, I'm dealing with that. And I wish maybe people would deal with me in that kind of way. Well, I'm going to share with you pretty briefly 3 thoughts from this passage about how do we minister to people who have anguish of spirit, so to speak, who are under cruel bondage, so to speak. In today's vernacular, who are wounded. Okay, that's a term we're used to, familiar with, who are hurting, who have been compromised in some way. And so the first thought I want to share with you on working with, I'll call it, I guess it's the title of my sermon, I guess kind of worked into it right now, working with wounded people. So the first thought I would share with you about working with wounded people is it's possible that it's going to be harder to get through to these kind of people. There's a good possibility that if you say, you know what, the Lord's put on my heart that person or that ministry or that group, you're going to be in for the long haul. It's going to be hard ministering to them. Why do I say that? That's not just my opinion, although you'd probably be like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But look what happened here if you read through the passage here. So we go through verses 1 through 8. Moses is upset because God sent him to the people and the people didn't listen. He goes back to God and God then delivers this message. And what does God say? Okay, because he wants some reassurance because the people, you know, he's not having any success here. And so God says, I am God Almighty. That's a pretty powerful start. It's a good way to start the conversation. You should do it just because I'm God Almighty, but I'm God Almighty. And then he delivers a bunch of promises to the people, okay? First he said, I made a promise to Abraham and to Isaac and to Jacob. And this is a wonderful promise. I'm not going to go through all the promises that he made, okay? Wonderful promise. And I keep my promises. So you can rely on that. Well, okay, if I'm somebody listening, that's reassuring. I feel good now. God promised me. God keeps his promise. It's a pretty robust promise. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. And he said, I'm going to shortly rescue you from bondage. So all this slavery and bondage you've been under for the last 430 years, it's just about to end. It's just about to end. And then he says, not only am I going to keep my promise, not only am I going to rescue you, but I have a special land. It's a great land for you to live in. It's a really wonderful place. And I'm going to bring you there, and you're going to live there. And while I take you to that land, I'm going to be with you, and I'm going to care for you. This is all in verses 6, 1 through 8. He says, I'm going to be with you there, and I'm going to care for you. And he ends with this statement, I am the Lord. And then it says, Moses shared this with the people. Moses spoke so. Okay. To me, that's enough. I hear that story. I hear that sermon, that speech from God himself. I'm good. Where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? How fast do you want me to go there? It's a powerful message. It's got exciting promises. It's delivered by Moses, a man of authority, and God authenticated it before with some signs and wonders to say, hey, okay, I don't know if I believe this Moses guy, but hey, God showed him some signs even before he did this. So I'd be thinking, if I'm the nation of Israel, oh, finally, a ray of hope. Things are going to be okay now, right? It should be easy to get the people to believe, right? It should be easy to get them to believe. But it says they didn't hearken to God. Why? Because what I said, the anguish of spirit and the cruel bondage. Their difficult experience and their history affected their ability to hear and to respond to God. I would have to guess they wanted to believe, like my friend. He really wanted to believe what I was telling him. The people, I'm sure they really wanted to be helped, right? My friend really wanted to be helped. Every time I talk to him, he says, I wish I could believe what you believe. They were very open to listen. And they clearly needed help. Just couldn't do it. So if you're going to get involved working with people who have that wounded spirit, who come from a compromised or a difficult background, just plan ahead of time that it's probably going to be harder. Very fulfilling, but harder. If you don't mind, I'm going to weave in a couple of things about foster care, because that's the ministry that the Lord has called me to, into the sermon. But there's a thing in foster care called aging out of the system. And what that means, if you're not familiar with that, is when a child is in foster care, when they turn 18 years old, if they've not been adopted by a family, or they're not with a current family and they're not with that family, they just leave the system. The government says, okay, we've served you well. You might have been with 6, 7, 8, 9 families, but at 18, you're done. And we're good luck to you. You know, we've done our job as a society, and you're done. And they're out on their own. And likely they obviously have no family. There's a lot of bad things, and I'll talk about it more this afternoon. But listen to this. 70% of girls who age out of the system, and by the way, 30,000 kids age out of the foster care system every year. So there are 30,000 people who and they're out. 70% of girls who age out of the system will be pregnant by the time they're 21 years old. 21. So 7 out of 10 girls out of wedlock, most of them, will be pregnant by the time they're 21. And imagine ministering to these girls. Think about what she could have likely been through. First of all, she was abandoned by her parents. Okay? Likely shuttled around from home to home, furthering the feeling of abandonment. Nobody to really be able to rely on. No place to call home. Possibility that she was abused at some point during her journey. How much harder do you think it would be to reach and to minister to somebody like that versus someone maybe who has a more healthy, normal background? Obviously, everybody's different. We're all people. But my guess is that's going to be a harder person to minister to than the average person. So the first thought I have to share with you is, if you're going to get involved with a ministry to people who are hurting, it's probably going to be hard. I don't want to say hard, because everything is hard in life. I found that out. Isn't everything in life kind of hard? For the most part, it's hard. Yes, it's hard. That's not part of my sermon. That's the first thought. The second thought is kind of similar to the first thought, and you're going to be like, oh, duh. That makes sense also. The first one was kind of a little bit of a duh, and the second one will probably be a little bit of a duh also. There's a pretty high likelihood that the person you're ministering to is going to be skeptical. They're going to question. They're not going to just take what you have to say and be like, oh, yeah, you told me that. That's great. Yeah, okay, good. I'm going to move on with that. There's going to be a level of skepticism that the people had. And why do I say that? Well, number one, it makes common sense. But more importantly, number two, I think the scripture would echo what I'm saying. So God delivered the message here, and Moses shared it with the people. And then the verse in verse 9 says this. It says, I read it to you. It says, Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened not unto Moses. Okay, God shared it. Moses faithfully delivered the message. It contained all those exciting promises I told you about, right? And yeah, it doesn't make any sense to us. It's not really moving me. I'm not really induced to do anything about it. That was kind of the response of the people. And as I thought about this a little bit more, and as I kind of prayed about the sermon, I'm thinking to myself, why did they say that? Why was that response? Why were they so skeptical, so hard, so cynical? And I said, it just came to me. I'm like, well, okay. So I'm the people, and I'm thinking, okay, God, you're telling us you're going to rescue us. Well, really? It's been over 400 years. Where have you been for those 400 years? We've been here. You're going to just come rescue us now? Level of skepticism that somebody like that might have. And, oh, you're going to give us this great land? Well, that's wonderful. It's like the lottery, right? I'm going to win the lottery. Well, I'm a slave. I don't have anything. I have no promise. I have no hope. I have nothing that I own. And you're going to give us this great land? Sure you are. Yeah, okay, absolutely. Okay? You're promising us a lot of these wonderful things. All right? God's promising wonderful things, and they sound great. But what do I have today? Right? Look at my circumstances right now. They're not so good. And God says to the people in verses 1 through 8, I'm going to be with you. Now, to you and I, we're like, oh, that's awesome. That's what I want. Okay, that sounds great. Where have you been? Now, I'm not saying that every one of them said that, but you can imagine those thoughts could run through people's minds as they were listening to what God told them. And maybe we could begin to understand and to empathize with people who have been constantly disappointed in their lives, who have been let down, who've gone through something that's so traumatic that, or have been put in a compromised state, how they could have a level of skepticism about some of the promises we make, some of the things we tell them about God, some of those things that we hold as true and are true. There could be a level of skepticism when you're dealing with people who have been hurt, because their experience tells them, I can't trust anybody. I can't. I've been burned too many times. It's been hard. Every time I turn around, I get punched in the face. Why is it going to be any different now? So there's going to be a heightened level of skepticism among these folks if you're going to deal with them and minister to them. And I think that's part of the problem that the children of Israel faced here. Okay, it's going to be harder for them to listen, but there was a level of skepticism. I'll share another foster care statistic, fact, whatever, background. Again, these kids who age out of the system in foster care, if you're a guy, I gave you a girl, if you're a guy and you age out of the system in foster care, by the age of 26, there's a 60% chance you'll be convicted of a crime and then likely go to jail. 60% chance that you're going to go to jail. That's pretty serious. And by the way, these statistics are not even the worst ones. I'll share the worst ones with you this afternoon. Okay, so you're going to go to minister to this guy, and you're going to talk to him about the Lord. Well, maybe his background was something like this. It's probably doubtful there was ever a father figure there to guide him, to raise him, to mentor him, to correct him. And while you don't have to have that, it's definitely helpful. He probably realizes that his future is incredibly bleak, right? Because his future is bleak. And again, I'll share some of those things this afternoon. There's a small chance that anybody is going to be there to help him navigate through those very tumultuous years when you go from being a child to adult. He'll basically be on his own to make all his own decisions, to do all his own things. He'll have no financial backing, no personal backing, no help in any way, shape, or form. We might complain about our parents. Mom does this, dad's a pain in the neck. He's got nothing. He's got nothing. All right? And there's not a high likelihood he's probably ever learned to respect or honor a woman. So he's going to have trouble in his relationships with women. Right? So when you go to talk to him, there's a good chance he's going to be skeptical. It's going to be hard to talk to him too, but he's going to probably be skeptical. And so if you decide, if the Lord is prompting you to working with people who are, for my case, children, but in your case, people that are hurting, that are wounded, there's a chance that they may be skeptical. Go in with that knowledge. Again, it's going to be very rewarding for you, especially if the Lord has called you to do it, but they may be skeptical. And then the last thought I have is this. Again, probably not one you're going to be like, wow, it's interesting. You may have to be more patient and more caring, compassionate, whatever the right word is, empathetic, if you can be empathetic, when you deal with them. You're probably going to have to be more patient when you're dealing with them. If we go back to the verse, we read verse 9. So Moses spake unto the children of Israel. They didn't listen because of this anguish of spirit and this cruel bondage, all that they had suffered, all they've gone through, all the wounds that they had internally, all the suffering. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Go in, speak unto Pharaoh, king of Egypt, that he let the children of Israel go out of his land. So what we have here is, and I'm going to trace back for a second, just give me a moment's latitude. just to kind of set perspective. So we go back. God delivers the compelling message that should affect everyone. Moses goes on and faithfully delivers that compelling message. He shares it. The people essentially, I don't know, a different word, rebel, didn't listen, didn't hearken. They said, nope. Right? And these people, they don't have a long history yet. They're going to have a long history soon of doing that. This is the beginning of that long history. The people say, I don't believe you. Not doing it. Not involved. Don't count on us for this kind of thing. And then something that kind of struck me again as I was reading here, something interesting that happened. What did God do? Right? God got angry with the people, and right? No, that's not what it says. Well, God said he was going to destroy the people and start over with Moses, which he said at a different point later on. No, that's not what he said. Well, I'm going to deliver a plague the people because of their disobedience and their lack of faith and their lack of trust in me. No, that's not what he did. He doesn't even rebuke them. Doesn't even get angry with them. He just moves on as if he didn't hear it. He obviously heard it, but he moves on as if he didn't even hear it. And he said, Moses, go back to Pharaoh and tell him blah, 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 to do it. Now, maybe you can make the argument that these people, this is probably the first time that they had done that to God. And if you go through the history, if you're familiar with the story, there are many times when God said this to the people and they didn't believe, they didn't listen, they complained, they murmured, all these different things. You could say this is early on in the narrative, so maybe God was saying, okay, I'll overlook the first one. I don't think that's the case. My personal opinion. This is my opinion. Maybe, my opinion, based on what this says, maybe it was because God knew that these people had been through so much, that there was such anguish of spirit inside of them because they had been through this cruel level of bondage, because they had suffered so much. They had such a hard history that he said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to cut them a little slack. I'm going to overlook that. I'm going to be patient with them. And God is immensely patient. Okay? He's immensely patient and immensely forgiving and immensely merciful. All right? But it's not always consistent with the way God dealt with the children of Israel. And again, could it be that God in this situation was being more patient with the children of Israel because he knew about their circumstances, because he knew about their history, because he knew how much they were hurting? And so he said, okay, I got it. I understand. Right? And think about us as you minister to somebody, right? And they're hurting or they're wounded or what we've been talking about. I think it would behoove us if we said, because sometimes when you share with somebody and they don't respond, we either get frustrated or we get angry or we just quit, all right? We just say, I'm not doing this anymore. Maybe we could be a bit more compassionate. Maybe we could be a bit more understanding. Maybe we could be a bit more patient. Again, we all have our issues. We all have our baggage. We all have those things about us that hurt. We all have that, but certain people have it more than others. And why do I say that? I say that because God was that way. God was patient. God was understanding, and God was compassionate. So I think it behooves us to follow that model and have that same kind of mindset. Last foster care statistic for you. Remember those kids I told you about who age out of the foster care system, right? So 70% of the girls will be pregnant by 21. 60% of the guys will be convicted of a crime by the age of 26. 20% will be homeless the day they're done. Homeless. So you're 18 years old and you're homeless. Not only homeless because you chose to run away from your family, homeless because you don't have anything at all. Okay? Nothing at all. That's it. You're on your own. Okay? I'll talk about some other things this afternoon about jobs. So you have no financial stability. So imagine the anxiety that comes with that. Don't even talk about college. So that limits your future hopes, right? And think about what's going to be like out on the street. Could we, as Christians, who are called to deal with people like that, I'm not saying you're called to deal with that person, but people who are like that, facing that kind of future, could we, should we be more patient with them? Probably makes sense, right? That we should be more patient and more caring, more empathetic. Sometimes we're not, though. So maybe you can understand why God was a little bit patient with these folks, and maybe we should be patient with others. When I was, I'm going to end with this, I guess another illustration. When I was 22, 23 years old, I used to play a lot of basketball with my father. And he and I we used to play with a lot of my friends. So he was 50, probably my age, a little younger than me at the time. But he was into it, right? He was an old guy, but he was a good athlete. He played basketball and football in college. He was a really good golfer. He loved sports. He stayed active. And so he used to come out and play with the young kids all the time. And so I remember one day we were playing. It was at a gym near my home with a couple of guys that I knew, and he and I would always be on the same team. We have such tremendous memories from it. It's really one of the things that bonded us together. And I have, as thinking about it now, it kind of wells up joy in my heart. But all of a sudden, I remember we were playing, and all of a sudden, I heard a strange sound coming from his side of the court, almost like a gunshot. Sounded a little bit like a gunshot. And then all of a sudden, I saw my father crumple to the ground. He didn't get shot, don't worry. What happened was he ruptured his Achilles tendon. And when it happens, if you do it severely enough, it sounds like a gun. And so he's laying on the ground in the corner, basically in a heap. And it took him a year in a cast. He didn't get surgery, in a cast to recover from the injury. But before my father got hurt, played basketball, he was active, running around. He still played golf afterwards, but he was very active and athletic and did a lot of things. That was the last time we ever played basketball together. We never played again. That was the last time he ever did anything really seriously active. Why? It just wasn't the same anymore. He suffered a catastrophic injury. And you'll get it when you hear torn Achilles. Everyone gets it. Oh, he's not going to go running the next day, is he? No. He's not going to play basketball anymore, is he? No. Why not? Because he ripped up. Well, think about these folks. They've suffered the equivalent in many cases of a traumatic injury. You can't see it because it's not physical, but it's still real. It's still real in their lives, and it takes time to recover from those sorts of things. So if God does call you or bring somebody across your path that's really hurting, that's really wounded, that's really had a tough background, remember it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard on your part to minister to them. I think it's worth it. I think God didn't bring them past you for no reason. That's number one. Number two, don't get discouraged when they're skeptical. They can't quite believe, not really sure. And be patient with them. Be patient with them. They could use patience. God's been patient with us, and so be patient with them.